When my company got bought out, I received a life-changing amount of money, $15 million. It didn't even feel real at first. I was just a small-town guy who had spent years coding in my apartment, surviving on instant noodles and dreams. Suddenly, I had more money than I knew what to do with. Most people would have called a financial advisor or bought a house, but my first thought was my mom. My mom, Linda, raised me alone after my dad left when I was 6. She worked double shifts at a diner, came home exhausted, and still made sure I ate dinner before bed. She never complained. Every time I doubted myself, she reminded me that one day my hard work would pay off. So when it finally did, I felt like she deserved to be part of it. I didn't even question it. She had always been the person I trusted most. When I told her about the money, her reaction was a mix of disbelief and pride. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You did it, baby," she said with tears in her eyes. "Your dad didn't believe in you, but I did." I told her I wanted to keep the money in her safe until I figured out what to do next. She smiled and said, "You know my house is your house. Your money's safe here." Her home had always been my comfort zone. It wasn't fancy, just a small brick house with creaky floors and that familiar smell of coffee and laundry detergent. The safe was tucked away in her bedroom closet, hidden behind old winter coats. I didn't think twice when I handed her the envelope. She watched me slide it inside, then turn the lock. I remember feeling calm, secure, even proud that I could finally give her a reason to relax after all the years she'd worked herself to the bone. That night, we celebrated. She cooked my favorite dinner, mashed potatoes, steak, and cornbread, and we laughed like we hadn't in years. She talked about traveling, maybe going to see the ocean again like she did when she was young. I told her we'd go together. For the first time in a long while, life felt steady, warm, and full of hope. I went to bed thinking everything was perfect. My mom was happy, I was successful, and the future looked bright. I didn't know that while I was sleeping, something was shifting inside her. A thought, a temptation, maybe a plan. I couldn't have imagined that this small act of trust would soon change everything between us. The next morning would come with silence, emptiness, and a truth I never wanted to face. But at that moment, as I drifted off to sleep in the room I grew up in, I believed family was the one thing money could never ruin. I had no idea how wrong I was. Growing up, it was always just me and my mom. My father left when I was a kid, and after that, she became my whole world. She never had it easy. I remember her coming home late at night with tired eyes and sore hands, sometimes too exhausted to even eat. She worked at a diner during the day and cleaned offices at night. Even when money was tight, she made sure I had food, clothes, and school supplies. She gave up her own needs without ever complaining. That kind of love stays with you. She never remarried, even though a few men showed interest over the years. She said I was all she needed, and I believed her. Sometimes I felt guilty watching her struggle, but she always told me, "Ethan, every sacrifice I make is worth it if it helps you build a better life." Those words shaped me. They pushed me to study harder, work longer, and never give up, even when things seemed impossible. When I finally made it, when the company I helped build got sold, she was the first person I wanted to tell. I could hear her smile through the phone when I said, "Mom, we did it." I meant it too. Every long night, every missed meal, every tear she hid from me had led to that moment. I wasn't just proud of myself. I was proud of us. When I arrived at her house that evening, she was already waiting at the door, like she used to when I came home from school. She pulled me into a hug that felt like home. There were tears in her eyes, but they were happy ones, or at least that's what I thought. "You did it, baby," she whispered. "You finally did it." I told her I wanted to share my success with her. I wanted her to rest, to live comfortably for once. I handed her the check, $15 million, and told her I trusted her to keep it safe until I figured out what to do next. She looked at me like she couldn't believe what she was holding. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. Then she smiled, that same warm, motherly smile I'd seen my whole life. But there was something in her eyes I couldn't read. Maybe it was pride. Maybe shock. Or maybe something else, something I was too blind to recognize at the time. I told myself I was just imagining things. After all, this was my mom, the woman who gave up everything for me. There was no reason to doubt her. As she placed the envelope into her safe, she looked back at me and said softly, "You've made me the proudest mother alive." I smiled back, completely unaware that behind that calm voice and gentle face, something had already begun to change. I thought I was repaying her love and trust. I didn't realize I was handing her the chance to betray both. The next morning started too quiet. I woke up expecting to hear the sound of coffee brewing in the kitchen, or my mom humming to some old country song like she always did. But the house was completely silent. It felt strange, like the air itself was heavier. At first, I thought she had gone for a walk or maybe to the grocery store, but something didn't feel right. I walked into the kitchen. The coffee pot was empty, no mug on the counter, no breakfast on the stove. That was unusual for her. She never started a day without her morning routine. I called out, "Mom?" No answer. I checked the living room. Her purse wasn't there. Her favorite blanket was gone from the couch. The uneasy feeling in my chest grew stronger. I went to her bedroom, thinking maybe she was still asleep, but when I opened the door, I froze. The bed was perfectly made. The closet doors were wide open, and I could see the hangers swinging slightly. Her clothes, shoes, and even her jewelry box were gone. It didn't make sense. I turned to the corner where the safe used to sit behind the coats. It wasn't there either. The space was empty, leaving behind only a faint outline on the carpet. For a long moment, I just stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My heart started pounding as my mind tried to find some logical reason. Maybe she moved the safe? Maybe someone broke in? But the house wasn't broken into. Everything else was untouched. Her car keys were missing too. That's when the truth started to sink in, slow and painful. I ran to check if anything else was gone. Photos, papers, anything that could tell me where she went. Nothing. It was as if she had packed up her life overnight and disappeared without a word. I sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the empty space where the safe had been. The same safe that held the $15 million I had trusted her with. A wave of cold realization hit me. My chest tightened, my stomach turned, and I could barely breathe. She didn't just leave, she took everything. My mom, the woman who had sacrificed her whole life for me, had walked out with all the money. I kept telling myself there had to be a reason, maybe an emergency, maybe she planned to come back. But deep down I knew. It wasn't just the money that hurt, it was the silence. No note, no message, no goodbye. Just emptiness where love used to be. I stood there for a long time, numb and confused, wondering how someone who gave me everything could suddenly take it all away. That morning, something inside me broke. Not just my trust, but the part of me that still believed family could never betray you. I went to the police the same day I found her gone. Sitting in that small station, trying to explain that my own mother had disappeared with $15 million, felt unreal. The officer behind the desk kept giving me this look. Half sympathy, half disbelief. He asked the usual questions. Did she leave a note? Any fights recently? Are you sure she didn't just take a break? I wanted to scream. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She was gone, and she took everything. They filed the report, took her picture, and promised to look into it. But I could tell by their tone that they didn't think much would come of it. People run away all the time, they said. Adults have the right to disappear if they choose to. Unless there was proof of a crime, there wasn't much they could do. It hit me hard. I had no evidence, no clue, just an empty house and a broken heart. For days, I kept calling her number, hoping she'd pick up, maybe explain herself. But it went straight to voicemail. I even tried calling her friends and old coworkers. None of them had seen or heard from her. It was like she had vanished into thin air. When I checked the driveway, I noticed her car was gone too. Later, I learned she'd sold it a few days before she disappeared. That's when I realized this wasn't sudden. She had planned everything, quietly, carefully, like she knew I would never suspect her. I checked her bank accounts, her emails, even her social media. Nothing. She had wiped it all. No traces, no messages, no photos. The woman who used to call me 3 times a day had become a ghost. I didn't know what hurt more, losing the money or realizing she had been planning to leave me long before I ever noticed. My friends tried to comfort me. They said things like, "It's just money, or you'll earn it back." But they didn't understand. I wasn't mourning the money, I was mourning my mother. I kept replaying every moment in my head, every time she smiled at me, every time she said she was proud. Were those all lies? Did she ever really mean it? At night, I couldn't sleep. I'd stare at the ceiling, thinking about how easily she fooled me. I remembered how she raised me to be honest, kind, and loyal. All the values she broke in one single act. I felt like my entire life had been built on a lie. One night, sitting alone in my empty living room, I whispered to myself, "She raised me on morals but left me for millions." The words sounded hollow but true. I wanted to hate her, but part of me still wanted her to come back and say it was all a mistake. Deep down, though, I knew she wasn't coming back. The person I trusted most had become a stranger, and there was no way to undo what she'd done. Weeks passed, but the emptiness in the house never faded. Every corner reminded me of her. The chair she used to sit in, the pictures on the wall, even the smell of her perfume still lingering in the air. I tried to clean up, thinking it would help me move on, but it only made the silence louder. The police had stopped calling, and I stopped expecting answers. It was just me and the memories she left behind. One afternoon, while cleaning her room, I decided to go through the old furniture she'd had for years. I pulled the dresser away from the wall to vacuum behind it, and something caught my eye. A small white envelope taped underneath the wood. My heart skipped a beat. For a second, I thought it might be some kind of clue or apology. My hands shook as I tore it free and opened it. Inside was a single folded paper. It wasn't long or emotional. Just one sentence, written in her familiar handwriting. "Don't look for me. I deserve this more than you ever will." I stared at the words for a long time, unable to breathe. My stomach tightened as the meaning sank in. There was no apology, no regret, no explanation, only justification. She believed she had the right to take everything and walk away. I kept reading the line over and over until the ink blurred through my tears. The woman who taught me to share, to give, to be fair, had decided she deserved my success more than I did. Something inside me broke that day, but not in the same way it had before. The sadness that had been crushing me for weeks turned into something colder, a quiet, steady anger. It wasn't about revenge or money. It was about the truth. I needed to know why. I needed to understand what could make a mother turn on her own son. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at that letter, the words echoing in my mind. "I deserve this more than you ever will." It played like a loop, digging deeper each time. I thought about every sacrifice she'd made, every word of love she'd said, and wondered when it all started to fade. Did she ever mean it? Or had she been planning this all along, convincing herself she was owed something? I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my wallet. It wasn't just a message anymore, it was a promise. Not from her, but from me. I would find her. Not because of the $15 million, but because I couldn't let her story end like this. She took my money and my trust, but she wasn't going to take my peace. I needed to see her face again, to look her in the eyes, and hear her say those words to me. Only then would I be able to let go. That night, I made myself a silent vow. No matter how long it took, I would find her. Not to take back what was stolen, but to take back my closure. Months went by, and life became a blur of routine and silence. I went to work, came home, ate, and slept, but nothing felt real anymore. The letter I found kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. Every time I thought about her words, the same questions came back. Where was she, and how could she do this to me? I had stopped expecting answers until one afternoon. My phone rang with an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's calm voice introduced herself as Olivia, my late father's lawyer. It took me a moment to remember her. She had handled my father's estate years ago, right after he passed. She said she needed to confirm something with me and asked if I had recently made a large withdrawal using my father's old name. My stomach dropped. I told her no, my father's accounts were closed long ago. There was a pause on the other end before she said quietly, "That's what I thought, because someone using his name just took out a significant amount of money from a bank here in Florida." The room went cold. I asked her if she knew who it was, and she hesitated before saying, "Ethan, it was your mother." For a few seconds, I couldn't even respond. My hands went numb as I gripped the phone tighter. After all these months, I finally had a lead, and it came from the last place I'd ever expect. Within days, I booked a flight to Florida. I didn't tell anyone. I packed only a small bag and the letter she left behind. The moment I landed, I went straight to the bank Olivia mentioned. I showed them my ID and explained the situation. The manager confirmed that a woman matching Linda's description had been there recently, withdrawing cash and transferring funds overseas. She had used fake documents, even my father's old identification number, to open accounts under different names. I felt sick. Each new detail I uncovered made me realize just how far ahead she had planned everything. She had created fake identities, set up offshore accounts, and bought property under a new alias. Every trace of her old life, her phone number, her house, her car, was gone. It was like she had erased Linda Miller from existence. I spent the next few weeks tracing the paper trail she left behind. Each bank led to another. Each address turned out to be either fake or abandoned. But with every dead end, I grew more determined. I wasn't chasing the money anymore. I just wanted to understand how the person who raised me on honesty could build her life on lies. One night, sitting in a small motel room surrounded by files and receipts, I looked at her handwriting on the letter again. The same woman who said she deserved it more than me was now living under a stolen name. I didn't know where this road would end, but I knew one thing for sure. I was finally getting closer. It took almost a year before I finally found her. Every lead I followed brought me closer, and each one revealed more of the life she had built for herself. She wasn't hiding in fear. She was living comfortably, maybe even proudly. One evening, I received confirmation from a private investigator I had hired in Florida. He said a woman matching her description was living under the name Monica Lee in a quiet beachside neighborhood in Miami. He sent me pictures, and there she was, my mother, walking out of a beautiful white villa, dressed in designer clothes, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. I stared at the photo for a long time. It was her, no doubt about it. The same woman who used to wear old sweaters and keep her hair tied back was now living like someone entirely new. Seeing her like that made my heart twist in ways I can't describe. There was relief that I'd found her, but also anger that she didn't look lost or guilty. She looked happy. A few days later, I drove to Miami. I parked across the street from her house and watched her through the window for hours. She laughed while talking on the phone, made herself coffee, and walked around the garden like she'd lived there forever. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of the car and walked straight up to the door. My hand hesitated for a moment before I rang the bell. When she opened the door, the color drained from her face. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked exactly the same, yet completely different. Expensive jewelry, perfect hair, confidence in her posture. But behind her eyes, I saw fear. I finally said, "Mom, or should I say Monica?" Her lips trembled. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" I kept my tone calm, even though my chest was tight. "I think that's my question. What are you doing here?" "With my money." She looked away, trying to compose herself. "You don't understand," she said softly. "I took what I deserved. All those years, I struggled alone while your father walked away and you built your life. I was always the one left behind. I wasn't going to die with nothing to show for it." Her words hit me like knives. "So that's how you justify it? You raised me on honesty and loyalty, and now this." She stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes. "You have everything, Ethan. You'll make more. I just wanted a little peace, a little comfort before I'm gone." I shook my head. "You could have asked. You didn't have to destroy us for it." For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something, but then she turned away. I realized then that the woman standing in front of me wasn't the mother I grew up with. She was a stranger wearing her face. All the love I once felt was still there, buried deep, but it was tangled with hurt too heavy to untangle. That night, standing in her doorway, I understood something I never wanted to. Sometimes, the people you trust the most become the ones who break you the deepest. She stood there frozen, waiting for me to yell, maybe even curse at her, but I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and realized how far apart we had grown. The woman who used to hold my hand when I was scared had become someone I barely recognized. Her eyes darted between the door and me, like she was deciding whether to run. I sighed and reached into my bag, pulling out a thick brown folder. She looked at it with confusion. "What's that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't answer right away. I just placed it on the table beside her cup of coffee and opened it slowly. Inside were papers, bank statements, contracts, transfer records. She leaned closer, and when she saw the numbers, her expression shifted from confusion to panic. "These," I said calmly, "are the real accounts. The actual money I received from the company sale." I paused for a moment, letting my words sink in. "The $15 million you took was never the full amount. It was a decoy fund, a part one set aside, just in case someone tried to take advantage of me." Her face turned pale. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. I looked her straight in the eyes. "I knew, Mom. I knew you might do something like this. I didn't want to believe it, but part of me needed to know if love was stronger than greed." She took a step back, shaking her head. "You tested me," she said, her voice cracking. "After everything I did for you?" I kept my tone quiet but steady. "No, Mom. You tested yourself. The room fell silent. I could hear the waves outside crashing softly against the shore, but inside the house, everything felt frozen. She looked down at the papers again, scanning them like she hoped she'd misread something. Then her hands began to tremble. "You're lying," she whispered. "You're trying to hurt me." I shook my head. "If I wanted to hurt you, I'd have done that a long time ago. I came here for one thing, the truth. And now I have it." She turned away, holding her forehead like she couldn't believe what was happening. "So, all of this," she muttered, "the visits, the police, the searching, it was all part of your plan?" "No," I said quietly. "It was part of my pain." For a long time, she didn't speak. Her breathing grew uneven, and she finally looked at me, not as a son, but as someone she'd lost forever. I could see the regret forming behind her eyes, but it was too late. The moment she chose money over me, everything we once had was gone. I stood up and closed the folder. "You wanted peace and comfort," I said softly, "but you traded love for loneliness." She didn't answer. She just sank into the chair, staring at the papers like they were the proof of everything she'd thrown away. As I walked toward the door, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt empty, like something inside me had finally burned out. She had failed the test, and I had lost my mother long before I even found her. I walked out of that house without looking back. The sound of the waves mixed with the soft hum of the wind as I stepped onto the street. My heart felt heavy, but not in the same way it once did. The anger, the pain, the confusion, all of it had faded into something quieter. Acceptance. I finally understood that sometimes you can't fix what's already broken. Behind me, I could hear her voice calling my name. "Ethan, wait. Please." But I didn't stop. I had heard enough. Every word she could say now would be too late. The woman I once trusted with my whole world had already made her choice. She had chosen money over love, greed over family. I didn't hate her anymore. I just couldn't carry her in my heart the way I used to. By the time I reached my car, I felt lighter. I had already made the necessary arrangements with the authorities before coming to see her. The money she'd stolen, the so-called 15 million, had long been frozen and flagged under her false accounts. It wasn't real anymore. She thought she had built a new life with it, but in reality, it was already gone. When I got back to Texas, I spent a few days alone, thinking about everything that had happened. My friends tried to cheer me up, but I didn't need cheering. What I needed was peace. For the first time in months, I could finally breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I knew she would probably try to reach out again, maybe even beg for forgiveness, but I also knew I couldn't let her back into my life. Some wounds don't heal by reopening them. They heal by staying closed. I looked at the remaining part of my real earnings and thought about how much good could come from it. I didn't want the money to become another symbol of pain or greed. So, I decided to use it differently. I set up a small foundation to help single parents. People like my mom once was, who struggled but still loved selflessly. It wasn't about revenge, it was about balance. I wanted to remind myself that there were still parents out there who gave without expecting anything in return. The first family I helped was a young mother with 2 kids. She worked long hours but never complained. Watching her smile when I handed her the keys to a small apartment reminded me of the mother I used to know, the one who fought for love, not money. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. It hurt, yes, but it also taught me something real. Family isn't always blood. It's the people who stand by you when there's nothing left to take. The ones who stay because they care, not because they need something. I whispered to myself, sometimes family isn't blood, it's loyalty. And for the first time in a long while, that truth brought me peace. Years passed, and Ethan's life slowly took on a calm rhythm again. The pain that once ruled his heart had turned into quiet wisdom. He had built a new home on the outskirts of Austin, a peaceful place surrounded by trees and open skies. Every evening, he would sit on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun melt into shades of gold and orange. It was his favorite time of day, the hour that reminded him how endings could also be beautiful. He was no longer the same man who once believed that love alone could protect him from betrayal. He had learned that love without trust was fragile, like glass that could shatter with one careless touch. He had given his heart, his loyalty, and his faith to his mother, only to have them crushed under the weight of greed. But over time, he realized something deeper. Betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. It can rebuild you if you let it. Ethan had become more thoughtful, more careful with the people he let into his life. He didn't close his heart completely, but he learned to keep it guarded. He no longer sought revenge, and he didn't hold on to anger. Those feelings had burned out long ago, replaced by something far stronger: peace. He had discovered that true strength wasn't in fighting back or proving someone wrong. It was in finding peace when you had every reason to stay bitter. One evening, as the sky dimmed into twilight, he thought of his mother. He wondered where she was, if she ever regretted her choices. A small part of him hoped she had found some kind of redemption. But he knew he would never go looking for her again. That chapter of his life was over. Some doors are meant to stay closed, not out of hate, but out of wisdom. His foundation had grown over the years. It had helped dozens of single parents rebuild their lives. Seeing those families find hope and stability filled him with a sense of purpose. Every smile, every thank you letter reminded him why he had chosen peace over bitterness. It was his quiet way of turning pain into something meaningful. As the first stars began to appear, he leaned back in his chair, feeling the cool breeze brush against his face. He whispered softly to himself, "Love without trust is just an illusion, and betrayal from blood teaches the deepest lessons." In that moment, he finally understood what life had been trying to teach him all along. Not every loss is a curse. Some losses clear the path for something better. He didn't need to win or take revenge. He had already found something greater. He smiled faintly and looked up at the fading light. "Sometimes," he said, "the best revenge isn't payback, it's peace." And as the world grew quiet around him, Ethan knew he had finally found his own.